All right, everyone, welcome to the Tonto's Demise. Obviously, it must be week 11 with the knockout music. I don't know if I can't recall if that's tradition, if I do that every year. If I don't, I should, at least. Little LL Cool J, Mama said knock you out because, as we know, week 11 means that is the last week for the knockout pool. And congratulations from Gags to Riches. It was him versus Possum Magic this week. There was no splitting the pot, being pussies, man against man, winner take all. Me versus you, basically. And Gags comes out on top ahead of Possum Magic. He wins the knockout pool this year. So your dues are paid. You're playing for free this year, or at least next year. We'll see how things pan out in the upcoming weeks here. Maybe you'll be winning a little more cash before everything is said and done. Hopefully, you're not winning the back-to-back champion pot because I think we definitely want to let that grow a little bit until it's something a little more significant. So, I mean, it's certainly a possibility, but the rest of us are going to do everything we can to keep you from going back to back and let that pot build up till it's, who knows, maybe it might, who knows how long it'll take, years possibly, till, when was the last time we had back to back? Probably about 10, it's been about 10 years now. So that pot could build up, be something a pretty significant amount eventually. So, let's see. So yeah, Gags to Riches, you are the knockout pool winner for the year. Anything else we need to mention before we get into the recaps? Really, kind of a lot of the matchups was kind of a quiet week, but I think we could safely say that we had at least thus far, don't want to get ahead, the matchup of the year, the podcasters of power going against each other. And this one was one for the ages. Both teams go over 200 points. Hillbillies on PCP rolling right along. But unfortunately, Yinzer Jags pops off for an even bigger score this week and sinks Hillbillies on PCP to under 500, 5-6, with only 2 weeks to go, meaning Hillbillies on PCP need to win out their schedule to get to 7 wins. We'll talk about that maybe at the end of the recap here because we've got some playoff things going on. But yeah, this week we had some playoff implications in terms of where the standings are. Kind of jumbled things up a little bit towards the middle there, the end of the playoff race here. Really, I think based on the scheduling here, the last 2 playoff spots are definitely still up for grabs. I really think Gags and Disco, they're 3 and 4 right now in the standings. The Topes and Yinzer Jags, according to Yahoo, have already clinched. But with 7 wins already, Gags and Disco really just have to win one more to really solidify that playoff spot. Because Gags at 7 and 4, 2 games to go. He's only 2 games ahead of Hillbillies and Shawshank, 1 game ahead of Possum and Darkwing. Actually, I think Gags and Disco play each other this week, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So one of them will definitely get win number 8. Whoever loses that matchup will drop to 7 and 6, and actually could be in a bit of a tricky spot going forward. With 1 week to go, they might have to get a win to secure a playoff spot there in week 13. So, yeah, we'll get into that. Probably talk about that in much more detail a little bit later. How about we do the actual recaps here before we get into that stuff. So, speaking of Gags to Riches, the defending champion, we always start the recaps with him, and he gets a victory over his brother Ed Lager, this his buddy, his brother, his pal, whatever you want to call him. An even 186 from Gags to Riches, while Ed Lager 140.9. Gags, he has Deshaun Watson go for 65.5, just under 66. His receivers, Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, and Julio Jones. Evans goes for 16, Tyreek 27, and Julio only 6. He's got a Q next to his name. I don't know if they just said tight hamstring on that. He missed most of the game. He actually came in and played and converted a 4th down and 13 or something like that near the end of the game, because I was watching it on Yahoo here, listening to the Steelers game and being obviously interested in what Matt Ryan was doing and disappointed in what Matt Ryan was doing. But yeah, Julio was out for most of that game. Don't know what his status is, but I would think that hamstring tightness is probably something that just needs worked out. Hopefully not a significant injury, and something that a few days off, maybe he just needed to stretch it enough, or more, I should say. But it's been a nagging thing with Julio Jones all year, hamstring issues. So it'll be interesting to see going forward, especially as we are rapidly approaching the playoffs, if Julio Jones' status has a serious effect on Gags and his success or lack thereof going forward here. So that'll be something to watch out for. His running backs, Ronald Jones and Duke Johnson, 2.5, 6.5. Travis Kelce, just under 28. In the flex, Christian Kirk goes for 9 points. Tucker, your kicker, about 8.5. And then the Tennessee Titans defense. Yahoo says 7, but we bumped you up about 9 points there, I'm going to guess. So 16 was probably your score from the Tennessee Titans defense. But Watson, Tyreek, and Kelce both going for 27, 28 points there. Enough to get you, so that was over 100 from just those 3. Enough to get you past Ed Lager this week, whose playoff hopes are probably out the window now, falling to 4-7, and your point total is pretty low. Lamar Jackson, he goes for 34.5. Receivers, Michael Thomas with a bounce back. Maybe the switch to Taysom Hill is going to be a big thing for you. 19.5 points. Cooper Kupp goes for 25.5. Ruggs only 2.7. Your running backs, Gibson and Hunt, 17.5, 9.1. Austin Hooper, the tight end, 6.3. Gio Bernard, 9.5. McManus, your kicker, about 8.5. And then the Green Bay Packers defense, I believe Yahoo says 7, and that must have been correct because you're only bumped up a little bit there. I assume all from McManus there. Yeah, I don't think you would have gotten 1 extra point, so it was probably 7. All right, but suffice to say, a disappointing season for Ed Lager all around. Up and down your lineup. Just all sorts of things affecting you. Said Lamar Jackson, a down year all around. Michael Thomas missing a lot of time and just starting now to bounce back into form. I mean, half the players on your roster here were you traded for along the way here. So most of your team is new. So I'm not sure exactly. I'm not going to waste time going back and looking back. 2 players that you traded away. I know Marquise Brown was one of them. He's now riding the bench, at least currently, for Disco. He might have to start him this week because I think Galladay, once again, is going to be out. But yeah, Ed Lager said drop to 4-7. Best record you could have at this point would be 6-7. Don't think a 6-7 is going to make the playoffs this year, so you are most likely out. But again, your point total is one of the unfortunately one of the lowest in the leagues this year. So even if you did win out your schedule at 6-7, and a 6-7 does make the playoffs, I really don't think it'll be you. Just nothing personal, just saying following the numbers and telling you what it looks like they're leading us to here. So unfortunately, Ed Logger, disappointing for you, but we still have 2 weeks to go. Maybe you can take somebody else down with you. Gags to Riches, he moves up to 7-4. He is in third place, even with this victory. Didn't really move anywhere. I don't think him or Disco moved anywhere in the standings. I'm sorry, Disco I think moved up and Possum Magic moved down, I should say. But I'm just sorry. Gags and Disco, I'm already excited to see what happens in that matchup here coming up in week 12. All right, next matchup, we'll save the big one for last. We'll go Springfield Isotopes versus Saquon It Ain't So. Both teams had players on Monday night, and let's see. Let's take a grab. Let me grab my notes here. Saquon It Ain't So actually had about a 1.5 point lead going into Monday night. He had Devery Henderson left to play, the running back from the Rams, while the Isotopes had Gronk and Suckup, the kicker from Tampa Bay. And the Isotopes were able to get enough points from Gronk and Suckup to get past Saquon It Ain't So. 141 to 134.25. An ugly one here all around. For the Isotopes, we had Matt Ryan go for 24.5. DeAndre Hopkins, 10.1. Calvin Ridley, 14. Deontay Johnson, 23.1. Running backs, Kamara and Jones, 10.5 for Kamara, 17.1 for Jones. Speaking of Taysom Hill and Michael Thomas a bit earlier, I'm a little bit worried going forward because this was actually the first game of Alvin Kamara's professional career where he did not catch a single pass. He had one target, did not catch a pass for the first time in his career. Taysom Hill, typical play I thought from him, taking off and running quite a bit especially when they get down towards the goal line there. He's going to take off and run and probably poach touchdowns from Kamara and Latavius Murray. Not happy with what I saw in that game from him and the future prospects for Kamara. So Drew Brees can't get back fast enough. Hopefully, the Topes will have a first round bye, meaning week 15. It's plausible that Drew Brees is back by then, but hopefully things will change a little bit going forward, and Taysom Hill will realize that he needs to get Alvin Kamara a little bit more involved in the offense, especially considering how much they just paid the man. And I was really surprised to see that stat. That reason why I'm mentioning it. Said Kamara's very first game ever in the NFL without a reception, and fortunately, it did not cost the Isotopes a victory here this week. Gronk 4.5, Hines in the flex 8.5, Suckup the kicker about 6.5, and then the Chargers defense going against the Jets bumped us up about 10 points there, so I believe the score was 23 for the Chargers defense. Said some not so good scores there, but it was just enough to end up getting by Saquon It Ain't So. He had Andy Dalton go in, picked up for the injured Drew Brees, and then he picked up Jameis Winston, thinking that he was going to start for New Orleans. That actually ended up not happening, so he had to go in and pick up Andy Dalton. Ended up being a good move because Dalton went for 42.5 points. Almost got you a victory here this week on that plug and play. Juju goes for 6, Devontae Parker 18, and Corey Davis, I think you might have plugged him in at the last minute over, I think KJ Hamler was in there for quite a while. And Davis actually goes for 16.5 points. James Conner, 13. Devery Henderson, 3. Jonnu Smith, 12. Jarvis Landry in the flex, only 4.5. Lutz, your kicker, about 4.5 also. And then the Philadelphia Eagles defense. Actually, this one ended up, I believe 15 is what Yahoo says, and that must be correct because your score is only bumped up 0.2 there. So, you should say a 7-point difference here. A lot of different things could have gone differently for either team. I know somebody said that Juju got hurt, he would have been better, but I think his injury came pretty late in the game, so not really sure he was going to do much more than he already did in that game. I'm thankful though. I should mention that James Conner had I think he was in there, but the Steelers put Benny Snell in for a 1 yard, I think 1 or 2 yard touchdown run, taking it away from Conner there. You had 6 points. This matchup if Conner gets that touchdown, instead of Snell, you add that 6.1. This matchup would have been less than a 1 point difference there. It still would have gone to the Isotopes, but said it would have been only by maybe 0.6 or 0.7 here. But yeah, that's it for this matchup. I think I got everybody there. With the victory, the Isotopes stay in first place, move up to 9-2. And unfortunately, Saquon, it ain't so. If you had any chance of staying alive, you had to get a win this week. And unfortunately, you weren't able to do so. And you dropped to 3-8. You were in 11th place. You're already looking on to next year. Hopefully bigger and better things for you up ahead. Can't get much worse than all the things. Just an unfortunate season for you with injuries and things like that. So obviously Saquon and Dak. Drew said then you lost Breeze here going, but so we'll see what happens these next 2 weeks. Obviously you can play spoiler to maybe somebody else. Your team still got a solid up and down lineup that can pop off any time, and I think you've done that before during the course of the season here, shown up and maybe gave somebody a loss when they thought it was going to be a victory. Said 134 this week, but you could pretty easily, I don't know about 200, but you could be pretty close and maybe knock somebody. Somebody thinks they're going to roll over you, and maybe you'll crush some dreams here in the next week or two. But yeah, really not much else that can be said. No need to remind you, Jay. No, I really don't think you watch or listen to any of this anyway. But yeah, just a disappointing and unfortunate season for you all around. But you said your team was solid at the beginning. Just couldn't quite get through big injury problems. Just plain old bad luck. But yeah, you still got some weeks left, and we will look forward to next year and getting to see what you bring to the table here. So, yeah. Next up, we had Darkwing Jet trying to keep his playoff hopes alive, going up against Mighty Midgets trying to play spoiler. And Darkwing Jet is able to hold on, 170.25 to 150.9. Darkwing Jet's playoff hopes stay alive as he moves up to 6-5. Take a look at him. He had Cam Newton go for 51, almost 52 points this week. Kind of surprising for him. He's been pretty quiet most of the season. A lot of 30-point scores here. Taking a look at him. That ended up game. Well, it was at Houston, so that was a good play. Thought that game could end up being a bit of a shootout there for your quarterbacks. DJ Moore goes for 21.8. Robert Woods on Monday night, 30.5 points. I guess this matchup, let's see, take a look, because it did kind of come down to Monday night. Darkwing had about a 43-point lead going into Monday night, while Mighty Midgets had his quarterback and a receiver, that quarterback's receiver, Antonio Brown, Brady and Brown, while Darkwing Jet had Woods. Thankfully for Darkwing, he had Woods because Darkwing had 139 points going into Monday night, and said Mighty Midgets ended up with 150. So fortunately, so you were able to you would have needed at least 10, 11 points there. But fortunately, Robert Woods actually was your best player probably this week. He goes for 30.5 points and gets you a 20-point victory. Gallup goes for 5 points. Kenyon Drake, 16. Joshua Kelly, because you literally had to pick somebody up because you had no healthy running backs with Swift being out this week. Let's see. I think you missed out on some picking up any of the other Detroit Lions running backs there. Peterson and Kerryon Johnson both got picked up. You played Josh Kelly from the Chargers, I should say, and he went for 2.2. Gazicki, your tight end, 8.5 points. Gage in the flex, 12.8. Myers, your kicker, goes for about 7.5, 8 points. And your defense, Houston Texans. Interesting play, Texans against your quarterback there. Yahoo says 8. The actual score must have been about 14, I'm going to guess. But your alternate option was going into it the Rams defense at Tampa Bay. Perhaps a bit of a frightening matchup there for your defense, but actually I think they would have been a pretty good play because, I don't know, something with Tom Brady is playing at night this year. Is he old man Brady? Is it too late for him once the sun goes down? Like he doesn't understand why he isn't allowed to go to bed. And he has had some really awful night game performances so far this year, which is kind of funny because you knew going into the season that him changing teams was going to be a big thing. A lot of matchups featuring him I believe they did get Tampa Bay probably wasn't going to get a lot of primetime games, but they ended up getting it this year thanks to Tom Brady, and he has kind of stunk it up in a lot of those primetime games. But Darkwing Jet, despite his quarterback playing his defense, he gets the victory over Mighty Midgets, unable to be spoiler this week. Tom Brady went for 38.8. His receivers, Cooks, Antonio Brown, and newly acquired Tyler Boyd, 12.5, 13.5, 17.5 respectively. Running backs, Sanders and the aforementioned Kerryon Johnson. Sanders goes for 9, Johnson 5.8. Godert, your tight end, 18.5. In the flex, CD Lamb, a couple catches, but a nice touchdown catch there, 16.5 points. Kicker Boswell goes for about 10.5. And the Minnesota Vikings defense, you picked them up, plugged them in against Dallas because your Bears defense was on a bye this week. Looks like they got you. Score must have been correct there because you only gained about a point. So Minnesota defense got you 7. All right. Suffice to say, pretty much the same thing about Mighty Midgets as we said about Saquon. It ain't so. Although, not sure Mighty Midgets had quite the devastating injuries as Saquon, but injuries nonetheless. He did trade Eckler, who is coming back shortly. Goder. At one point, all of his keepers were on injured reserve. Godert. I forget who your other one was. Let me see. Take a look. You must have traded your other keepers. I know Eckler was one, Godert was one, and who was your other keeper that you traded away? I'm guessing. Should I waste the time and look? Nah, we'll figure it. Doesn't matter. Anyway, this really just a disappointing season. Started off difficult. And I guess we coined the term getting cricked when Jim lost a couple matchups early on in the season by extremely slim margins. on, I believe, Monday night games where players got the points that they needed to get other teams the victory. Pretty much at the end of the game, last second losses there for Mighty Midgets. Heartbreakers at the beginning, and those couple losses really set the tone for the season for you. So a lot of trading back. You did a lot of trading this year, shuffling your roster, but just could not quite put the pieces together, catch a break here, and get a couple wins when you needed them down the stretch. Yeah, story of your season, basically. Yeah, a lot of disappointment and underperforming players. You were obviously affected by. You were one of the people affected by Dak Prescott going down, as CeeDee Lamb has been pretty quiet. Said Eckler going down was hurt for you. You had not Tom Brady. You had Patrick Mahomes for a brief period, and immediately turned around and traded him away. And I don't think Disco has lost since you traded Patrick Mahomes to him. Then I think Mahomes had one kind of disappointing week for you. The first week that you acquired him, and then you turned around and kicked him to the curb. You did get a slew of players for him, but what you've got hasn't really helped you get victories here. So, yeah, what can we say? Just hasn't worked out for you this year, Mighty Midgets. As for the victor in this matchup, Darkwing Jet, Mighty Midgets drops to 2-9. They are at the bottom in 12th place, looking to avoid that Phillip Rivers jersey next year. Darkwing Jet 6-5. He is in 6th place. We'll get to his playoff hopes here after we finish with the recap. But yeah, Darkwing Jet could have dropped below 500 and been in tough position for the playoffs. But it's actually looking pretty bright here for his chances of actually squeaking in to the playoffs there. So we will see. All right, next up, Disco versus Dub C. Another grudge match this week. And Disco gets the victory. He's got 5 straight. 175.4 to 143.95. Let's see. For Disco, Patrick Mahomes, just talking about him. He goes for 61. Your receivers, Godwin, Marquise Brown, and Mike Williams. Godwin, 18.5, catches a touchdown. Brown, 0. And Mike Williams catches a touchdown also. He goes for 17.2. Let's see. Zeke, 100 yards and a touchdown, 22.5 points. Adrian Peterson, only 1.8. Waller goes for 21.8. In the flex there, Jacobs, a couple Raiders on your team here. Jacobs goes for 13.5. Carlson, another Raider, goes for about 7.5. And then the Tampa Bay defense, let's see, Yahoo says 9. I'm going to guess the actual score was based on I'm going to say 13 was probably the actual score there. But yeah, so the 60 from Mahomes, despite that 0 from Brown, you had a couple players get 20-pointers there for you, and it was enough to get past Dub C Hooligans. He has Russell Wilson go for 45. His receivers, DJ Chark, Robbie Anderson, and Jamison Crowder, 8, 11.5, 2.5 respectively. Running backs, James Robinson and Edwards-Helaire, 11.5, 20.5. Your tight end, Schultz, goes for 12.5, scores a touchdown this week. Mike Davis, still getting life from him since McCaffrey re-injured himself and has still been out. So, but doesn't look like it's going to help you get into the playoffs here. 16 points from Mike Davis. Young Ho Koo gets about you. He had a couple 50-yard field goals in this game. Gets you about 13 points. And then the Patriots defense, unfortunately, they didn't do too much for you. 3 must have been the actual score there because we really didn't move you up at all based on what Yahoo had versus your actual score there. So, Dub C, with that loss, he drops to 4-7. Best he can do now is 6-7. previously said I don't think a 6-7 is going to make the playoffs this year, and you're currently in 9th place. While Disco moves up to 7-4, he is in 4th place. All right, what do we have left? Just one matchup, and then the big one. Shawshank versus Possum Magic. Shawshank trying to kind of keep his play up. I don't want to say he was playing spoiler, because he's definitely still got a shot at stealing a playoff spot here, as do several other people. While Possum Magic, he was trying to get win number 7 and perhaps knock Shawshank out of playoff contention and put himself into it. And this was a matchup that Possum Magic really kind of needed based on matchups going forward, at least on paper. And Shawshank steals the magic from Possum Magic, getting the victory, 167.4 to 135.8. For Shawshank, Justin Herbert goes for 71.5 points. AJ Brown, 16.2. Rieger, 9.2. And recently acquired Justin Jefferson goes for 17.5. His running backs, Fournette and Gurley, 9.5, 3.9. Let's see, Mark Andrews, who's been pretty quiet all year, shows up this week, gets you 20.5 points. In the flex, your other new acquirement, McKissick, he goes for 10 points. Zane Gonzalez, your kicker, only 3. And then the Miami Dolphins defense, who's been pretty hot so far this year, went to Denver. Kind of surprised there because Drew Lock has been kind of a turnover machine this year. They did get 2 turnovers, but they ended up losing the game. Miami's offense probably lost them the game more than anything else. I think Fitzmagic ended up going in that game there. Yahoo says 12, but I think the actual score must have been about 18 from the Dolphins defense. But yeah, that 70 from Herbert was enough to push Shawshank over the top this week against Possum Magic, whose playoff hopes are kind of iffy right now. Looking forward, but we'll get to that. This week he had Alex Smith go for 26. Let's take a look at your other quarterbacks. You had Stafford go for 27.5, and Tannehill goes for 45.5. So that would have been an extra 19 points. Would not have gotten you the victory this week. You were hoping for big things from Alex Smith against the Bengals, not so good Bengals defense there. Unfortunately, Smith only got you 26. Tyler Lockett, Scary Terry, and Jacoby Myers, your receiver trio, 21.5, 13.5, and 6.8. Derrick Henry, over 100 yards, that game-winning touchdown, he gets you 23.2. And what's this guy's name? Damian Harris, another New England Patriot that kind of held on to through the course of the season, hoping they would come around him and Myers, and they've started to come through. I mean, Myers was quiet this week, but he's had some pretty decent games here in the past couple weeks there. But Harris, he had 12.5. Hayden Hurst goes for 0, surprisingly there. That hurt you. And in the flex, Marvin Jones Jr. goes for 9. Kicker Fairbairn goes for about 10.5. And then the Chiefs defense couldn't do too much for you. Let's see. Yahoo says 3, but we bumped you up about 10 points there, maybe 9. So the actual score was probably 12 from the Chiefs defense, given all they could handle against the Raiders there, who did beat them, I believe, earlier in the year. I think that might be Kansas City was their only loss this year, was that game against the Raiders earlier. But yeah, Possum Magic. Story of this one, Herbert going for 70, and your quarterback only 26. This was a winnable matchup. Said if you had gotten maybe if you had started Tannehill, or at least gotten better production from Alex Smith, because the rest of your guys actually didn't do too bad, but that 0 from Hayden Hurst really hurt, and Myers there getting a 6, and your defense Would have liked a little bit more there, but yeah, the big said if Herbert scores a normal quarterback score, you definitely had a better chance at getting the victory here. But hey, Herbert has been playing. He's been lights out. He's been putting up at least 50 pretty much every single week. He's had 70. He's been over 70 before, and he went over 70 again this week. So if he's not a keeper next year for Shawshank, I would imagine that he will be traded to somebody and be a keeper for it. He's almost guaranteed he's going to be a keeper for somebody next year. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out. But anyway, with the victory, Shawshank moves up to 5-6. He's still got playoff hopes alive. Positive Magic, he drops to 6-5. He's in 5th place. Shawshank's in 8th. But yeah, Positive Magic still in the playoffs here as of right now, but probably needs to get to 7 wins. And he is, unfortunately for him, he can thank Gags for this, but he is playing the last 2 weeks of the season. He is playing the top 2 teams in the standings, Yinzer Jags and the Isotopes. So Positive Magic going to need to win at least one of those games to have a chance to make the playoffs here. I'm sure he's a little bit nervous going forward to see, but hey, anything is possible. We'll see what happens. Everybody's team is pretty good and capable of popping off at any time here. Any given Sunday, I guess I should say. While Shawshank Athletics, 5-6, that's in 8th place, still on the outside looking in, needs to win out the rest of his schedule and get some help from other people. So he's not out of it, but he still has a fighting chance, along with 4 or 5 other teams right now. Only 2 of you are going to get it, and several of you are fighting for it. So maybe the playoff race down the stretch will actually be a little bit more interesting than I thought it was going to be. But all right, let's get into the matchup of the week. As I said before, perhaps the matchup of the year thus far. This one was a back and forth slugfest. Every guy, pretty much everybody, both teams, every player. I'm tripping over my own tongue because I'm not used to talking this much, then this quickly, because I don't want to keep the length of the video getting too long here, because I have a funny feeling already that I'm going to get into it whenever we're talking about the playoff picture after this matchup. So, anyway, Yinzer Jags, he was going up against Hillbillies on PCP. Brian was worried that I gave him the kiss of death this week, and apparently I did by rooting for him and trying to get a 2-game lead over Yinzer Jags. And the Yinzer Jags, they responded, 231.85 to 214.25. The only 2 teams to go over 200 this week played each other. What was I going to say something. Yeah. Let's take a look. Yinzer Jags, Kyler Murray, 52. Oh, something caught in my throat there. Excuse me. Devontae Adams, Adam Thielen, and Amari Cooper. 23.5 for Adams, 32.5 for Thielen, and Cooper. Actually, why don't we do this matchup? So both teams kind of went off this week. Let's go back and forth because a lot of these players in your rosters here in your lineup kind of went toe-to-toe and matched up with each other. So in this matchup, we had Kyler Murray versus Ben Roethlisberger. Murray, 51.95 to Roethlisberger's 50.35. So slight favorite there to Yinzer Jags. Devontae Adams versus DK Metcalf, 23.6 for Adams, Metcalf 13.6. So a 10-point swing in favor of Yinzer Jags there. So far we've got about a 12-point margin here in favor of Yinzer Jags. Next up, we had Keenan Allen versus Adam Thielen. Both guys, I think this was a record for a career mark for Keenan Allen, 16 catches. He needed all 16 of those to keep up with Adam Thielen, who had 2 touchdowns. Both players over 100 yards. Keenan, 34.5 to Thielen's 32.3. So that brings the difference back down closer to 10 points there for Yinzer Jags. Next up, Chase Claypool versus Amari Cooper. Claypool 16, Cooper 14. So that moves it down to about 8 points. Dalvin Cook versus Latavius Murray, 28 points to 10.5. So that is about a 17.5 point margin there in favor of Hillbillies, which moves the needle in his direction by about 7 or 8 points there. Next we had Chubb versus Kalen Ballage. Chubb 14.4, Ballage 14.1. So only a 0.3 difference there between them. Hawkinson 10.8, Ebron 13.6. So we're getting closer and closer to this score being pretty even here. I've already lost track of what the actual number here was. But then in a flex, things start to move back towards Yinzer Jags' direction. He had Pittman. He only caught 3 passes, but his first one was a big one, a 40-some yard touchdown. He ends up with 15.5, while Judy in the flex for Hillbillies, only 6.5 points there. And perhaps the biggest factor in the matchup at kicker, Yinzer Jags have Blankenship. He actually kicked at least 4 field goals, did pretty good. Yahoo says 14, but we actually bumped him up at least a point or 2, I think, from the excess on his field goals there. So, yeah, it was probably closer to 15, maybe 16 points for Blankenship. And unfortunately for Hillbillies, his kicker was Prater from the Detroit Lions, and they got shut out. He missed a field goal. He got you -1. And then another big one here. Both defenses had big games this week. Yinzer Jags went with Cleveland over Baltimore. Good choice here. Because Baltimore ended up losing to Tennessee there. Kind of Baltimore Ravens defense, kind of the team in general. Bit of a tailspin there. So we will see if Yinzer Jags keeps rolling with the Cleveland defense going forward. However, I would suspect that the ineptitude of the Philadelphia Eagles and Carson Wentz certainly contributed to the outcome of this matchup. Cleveland Browns defense, Yahoo says 31. We bumped you up about 10 points, 11 points maybe. So I'm going to guess the actual score was 41 maybe, something like that, 40 or 40. I'm going to guess 40 because usually these scores, when they bump up for defenses, it's usually 3, 6, 9, 12, one of those numbers there, some factor of 3. So I'm going to guess the actual score was 40. And then for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense for Hillbillies on PCP, excuse me, Yahoo says 23, but we bumped you up about 16, 15 points. So their score actually must have been about 38 for the Steelers defense. So pretty close, almost even there. But yeah, just a couple scores, a couple positions here swung in favor of Yinzer Jags. The difference here was about 16.5 points. So if you get some kind of production from your kicker, and the flex spot there is what cost you. Looking at your line roster here, your bench here, I don't really think there was anything else that you could have done. Had you flexed, I think you picked up Carlos Hyde, but didn't play him. Would have been a better play, but even if you had played him, this matchup only would have been closer, and it was your kicker that really made the big difference here for you. So Yinzer Jags with the victory. He moves up to 8-3. He's in second place, and according to Yahoo, clinched a playoff spot. Yinzer Jags and the Isotopes have the little asterisks next to their names after this week. While Hillbillies on PCP drops to 5-6, he is in 7th place and will probably need to win both matchups here going forward on his schedule. And I would be remiss if I did not say that, said looking at Hillbillies on PCP's bench here real quick, Joe Burrow, I know he's a rival of the Steelers. But I feel bad for this because obviously it ended up being a pretty devastating knee injury. Hate to see it because the guy was having a great season, looking like he was going to be a wonderful fantasy football quarterback. Going to be fun to watch. He struggled this year against some tougher defenses, but other than for the most part, a rookie quarterback coming in doing well, and it's unfortunate to see that his knee injury, might be significant enough that actually his season next year might be kind of in question. Maybe it's fortunate that he's young, just out of college, so maybe his youth and overall health will contribute to perhaps a speedier timetable in terms of recovery there. But really hope to see he's got a bright future, and hopefully that wasn't wrecked here by this injury. But we will see, to be determined, what happens with him next year. And personally, I'm most upset because I already told some other people in terms in trade talks here, actually suggested you take T. Higgins away from me in trade because I was pretty excited looking forward to having him be one of my keepers next year. And I think also said to people, Burrow and T. Higgins look like they're going to be maybe not an NFL they're going to be superstars in the making here. And Burrow to Higgins looks like he was going to turn Higgins into a potential superstar, and I was really excited by the prospects of having Higgins for next year and the things that those guys could do together. But it's obviously everything changed just like that, and we will see what happens going forward. Should mention too, Tyler Boyd obviously in this matchup was traded away from the injured Jags, acquiring Austin Eckler, which is kind of a little bit frustrating because he's going to get Eckler coming back, he's going to get Mostert coming back. So really the weak spots on the injured Jags roster, you guys bolstered it for him, giving him Austin Eckler for the playoff run. So he's going to be getting 2 solid running backs here to go on top of his receiving trio and Kyler Murray. So plus his defense here. So this matchup was a good one. Here, already looking forward to what's going to happen in the playoffs here. Said everybody who makes it is going to have a pretty solid lineup, top to bottom here. So would have liked to see the injured Jags maybe not get better, but I think they did thanks to that trade there. But who knows? Austin Eckler, injury prone. Maybe something will happen to him. Hopefully not, but you don't like to see. He is one of the top running backs in the league, especially in a PPR league when he's healthy. Herbert is playing out of his mind this year, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Eckler once he comes back here. So, all right, that's it for this week, week 11. As you know, this was already mentioned. The knockout pool goes to Gags after this week. So, Don't know if we'll take a peek ahead at week 12 because this week we got big matchups, important matchups in terms of what might happen here with the playoff hunt. Even though the Isotopes and the Injured Jags have already clinched, there is potential. They both have some tough matchups and potential to the Isotopes trying to hold on to that number one spot. Certainly could drop out of that because they have some tough matchups here these last 2 weeks. So let's get into what's going to happen. I don't know if there's going to be, maybe there will be a telephone podcast this week, or don't know what's exactly going to go on. Since it is Thanksgiving and Detling technically might be in quarantine, self-isolation because of a contact tracing at the casino there. So hopefully you are not sick with COVID or anything yet, but you'll be able to, hopefully you didn't catch it from anyone and you'll be able to get back to work there soon. But lots of things going on this week, so there might not be a podcast. Maybe there will be. So we'll see. Anyway, the matchups. And we will get a bit into the playoff implications here. Springfield Isotopes versus Hillbillies on PCP. All right, let's just take a look. Hillbillies talking about these last 2 weeks here and the matchups going forward. The Isotopes said trying to hold on to that number one spot. This week they're playing Hillbillies. Next week they're playing Possum Magic. So 2 tough matchups. Could very easily end up 9-4. Starting 7-0, and then never get to 10 wins here, and quite possibly drop out of that number one seed. Based on the standings here, so the Isotopes have 9 wins. Gags and Disco, if they both win out, they could get to 9 wins, but the Isotopes would have to lose both matchups and could potentially get dropped out from a bye week if the Isotopes lose these last 2 weeks, and could be dropped to 9-4, and if point totals don't go their way either, could actually drop down into the 3 or 4 seed there. So, and then Hillbillies on PCP said he's 5-6. He probably needs to win both his matchups going forward. He's got the Isotopes this week. Next week, though, he's got Saquon. It ain't so. Just mentioned that Jay, a team maybe you think you're going to roll over, but it could be a difficult matchup. You don't want to look ahead too much to the future here. So Hillbillies on PCP said probably thinks that if he can get this win this week, he'll get it next week and end up 7-6 and in the playoffs there. So we will see what happens. Hillbillies have been rolling along all season long, have never slowed down really with their point scoring. Built up a pretty significant lead in terms of overall season point total. Just take a quick look here. Hillbillies, they had 1 week where they scored only 140, but other than that, they've been in the 190s, 180s, over 200s many times. So when you're playing Hillbilly, let's face it, even though he started 0-4, you got to bring your game when you're playing Hillbillies on PCP this year, because they're probably going to put up 175 to maybe 200 points against you. So yeah, we'll be hoping for the Isotopes will be hoping to get the victory this week. If they can make Hillbillies on PCP, if they can drop them to 5-7, that puts his playoff hopes really in a tough bind, because his best record would be 6-7, even though he's got the high point total. Things got a chance to shake out that a 6-7 team makes the playoffs. If that does happen, it will be Hillbillies on PCP. If that's where his record ends up being, but we will see. And I think I could say on behalf of everyone else who is making it will make the playoffs. The Isotopes probably really would like to get the victory this week and perhaps end Hillbillies on PCP's chances of making the playoffs, because I think I can speak for most of us that the Hillbillies on PCP not being in the playoff picture really opens it up for the rest of us. And if Hillbillies on PCP do make the playoffs, I don't think anyone's going to want to play them. Just saying, based on how things have been going this year, I think they will be even if they end up getting in as like the number 6 seed. I gotta think right now, based on everything that's going on and the course of the season, even as the number 6 seed, I would think if they get in, they would probably have to be the favorites going into the playoffs there. So, am I giving Brian the kiss of death? Again, hopefully. Although this time I'm not rooting for you, just projecting good things for your team going forward here. So, we'll see what happens. It's going to be, I said that this is a great matchup this week. All right, then we've got Darkwing Jut going against Saquon It Ain't So. Saquon It Ain't So, just trying to play spoiler. Well, I said Darkwing Jut perhaps kept his season alive this past week with that victory, going to 6-5. He plays Saquon this week. He plays Dub C next week, who is out of the probably out of the playoffs. We'll get to him. 2 winnable matchups for Darkwing Jut. He could actually end up getting into 8. He could end up with 8 wins if he can get number 7 this week. Darkwing Jut could end up sneaking into the playoffs and getting Christian McCaffrey back just in time to make a run at somebody, and perhaps get McCaffrey back and have him roll you right along to a Tonto Bowl. We'll see what happens. But Darkwing Jut, you're at 6-5. You have 2 winnable matchups here going forward. So you are in 6th place. You're currently projected to lose to Saquon It Ain't So, according to Yahoo, but the matchups are pretty much even here. But yeah, Saquon It Ain't So will look to play spoiler and perhaps knock you to 6-6, while Dub C next week will perhaps be playing. You'll be playing him with your playoff hopes riding on that one. My favorite matchup this week, Topes versus Hillbillies is going to be a good one. But then we've got 3 and 4, Gags versus Disco. Excited to see what happens in this one, because Gags, as you know, has Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, while Disco has got Patrick Mahomes as his starting quarterback. Mahomes scored 61 last week, but Kelce and Tyreek themselves both scored 28 points each. So similar production like that might not happen for both of those guys this week. It's tough to put up 28 points on a regular basis here, but I know they kind of talked about it before, obviously in the with the trades for the Isotopes there. If Gags getting those guys, having basically Mahomes' main 2 targets being a factor there, it wasn't really a thought at the time, because I was more interested in getting DeAndre Hopkins and worrying about that stuff later. But now it's Disco's problem, and he might never ever admit it. But I'm almost positive I would say that Disco, you've got to be nervous about that situation there. I don't think you'll bench Mahomes, but this situation has to have you a little bit nervous. I'm interested to see just exactly how that plays out this week. Both of you guys, and based on the standings, depending who wins this week and where you end up, personally, and why this matchup is interesting to me. One of you would need to drop. Gags, he's been number 3 for quite a while now. Disco's been moving up. If he drops down, I don't know who could end up overtaking the number 3 seed here. But obviously the 3 seed would go against the 6 seed in the first round of the playoffs. And so, yeah, unless there's a significant drop here, which is possible because Disco's kind of got a lower point total here overall. But maybe he could very easily actually win this week and maybe knock Gags down into 3rd place or down into 4th place there. But his point total is way ahead. The point of all of this is, will those two teams rematch in the playoffs? Gags versus Disco? I don't think so, based on the way things are looking. As disappointed as I am to say that, because I would love to see this matchup again in the playoffs when it really counts. So it doesn't look that way. So Disco, maybe not. You don't have to be too nervous about that matchup being something that affects you going forward here. So that's gonna make this matchup fun to watch. But like I said, the way things are shaping out, it's highly unlikely that those two teams are going to meet in the playoffs. I hope not, because it would mean I'm out at some point. Could they both make the? Could that be the Tonto Bowl? I don't want Gags to go to Tonto Bowl because I don't want him getting another championship already. Said Disco, he certainly deserving of a Tonto Bowl title after all these years, but that would be a difficult position for him to be in. Said with the Mahomes versus Tyreek and Kelsey there. So we'll see how that shakes out this week, what goes on. It's going to be a fun one to watch. If I'm said in this matchup, I'm nervous if I'm Disco, even though I said he will never ever admit to being nervous about it going in. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, that's going to be fun to watch. One of them will get their 8th win. One will end up 7-5. Still probably with a chance for the playoffs. Don't think Disco really could get knocked. It would take a lot for Disco to get knocked out at this point here. So, Gags said plays Disco this week. Next week, Gags has Mighty Midgets. While Disco this week has Gags, and then next week, Shawshank. So if Disco loses this week, Shawshank could be still fighting for a potential playoff spot, and that matchup could be pretty significant, especially if Disco is 7-5 and Shawshank is 6-6. Because Disco's got about a 100-point lead in terms of overall points there. So that'll be an interesting matchup next week. Just trying to project these last 2 weeks of matchups in terms of, at least on paper, who looks like is going to get 2 wins, who's going to lose twice, who's going to maybe go 1-1, have a tricky time going forward here. Next matchup, Dub C versus Mighty Midgets. Mighty Midgets just trying to play spoiler. Dub C, he's 4-7. Best he could be is 6-7. His point total, he's up there over 1,900. He's ahead of Shawshank. He's ahead of Darkwing. He's ahead of Possum. He's ahead of Disco. So, if a 6-7 team makes the playoffs again, I think it would end up being Hillbillies on PCP, assuming they lose one of their last 2 matchups. If they don't, Dub C, you've got a chance. Mighty Midgets, probably an ideal matchup for you at this point, just with the way their season has gone, but they did put up a pretty decent score. So you're going to need to show up this week, get that win, and hope that other things shake out for you going forward. Dub C plays Darkwing Jut next week. So that could be a matchup where Darkwing might need to get a win to get into the playoffs, and Dub C will be hoping to stay alive here and just to have a chance. So yeah, that's going to be well, Mighty Midgets next week he plays Gags to Riches there, so he'll be said blah. Mighty Midgets just trying to take some people down with him, or at least knock them down a peg or two on his way out the door for 2020. And Dub C still holding on to a chance here. So all these matchups are going to be important for at least somebody so far. Next, we got Shawshank versus Ed Lager. Ed Lager, you're 4-7. Your point total is the lowest of anybody in the league this year. So even if you somehow win out and make 6-7, you won't be making the playoffs, almost guaranteed, just because there's no way that another 6-7 team would drop behind you in terms of overall points. Just because you're at least 100, 150 points behind other people ahead of you, and I don't think you're going to be able to make that up going forward here. Even though you are a favorite against Shawshank Athletics on Yahoo going into this week, Shawshank, he needs to get a win this week, and he plays Disco next week. So Shawshank probably needs to win both of those matchups. Starting this week, he needs to get that win. If he loses, both of these guys will be 5-7, and Shawshank will probably have a much more difficult time with having a playoff shot here. So he needs to get this win. Ed Lager, again, I don't want to say you're done, but you're this close to being done. But you would like to, I'm sure, would maybe be a little satisfying end to the season here to take Shawshank's playoff hopes and take them out with you here. So Shawshank, important matchup for you this week. And then the last matchup, Yinzer Jags versus Possum Magic. Projection is pretty much even here, actually in favor of Possum Magic so far. But again, Yinzer Jags, 8-3. Been a tough matchup for most people all year long. A steady performer. And Possum Magic, he'll be looking to get that number 7 win and perhaps keep his playoff hopes alive because he's got the Isotopes next week. He needs to get at least to 7. He's hoping to get to 8 wins, but it's going to be tough for him to do that, at least in terms of going into the matchups on paper here. So in Yinzer Jags, he'll be looking to keep pace with the Isotopes, who said have a difficult matchup against Hillbillies this week. If Yinzer Jags can win and the Isotopes lose, Yinzer Jags would definitely they would both be 9-3. And thanks to last week's big score and the Isotopes been on kind of a slide the past few weeks, kind of trailing off after a hot start. Said Yinzer Jags has about a 90-point lead over the Isotopes in terms of overall points here. So he would jump into first place if he can win and the Isotopes lose. And Yinzer Jags next week plays Ed Lager. So that's a matchup Yinzer Jags could definitely win out his schedule, get to 10 wins, and perhaps bump the Isotopes out of first place there. Easily could happen. But Possum Magic, he plays, again, Yinzer Jags this week and the Isotopes next week. He's probably got to win at least one of those to have a chance of making the playoffs here. So it'll be all these matchups. This is probably going to be the best week of the season in terms of playoff shuffling, maybe some standings shuffling, jockeying for position here as we head into the last week of the season. So, yeah, big matchups. Looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. Just taking a quick look at week 13, even though we don't want to get too far ahead. Week 13 is Possum versus Isotopes, Darkwing versus Dub C, Disco versus Shawshank. Yinzer Jags have Ed, Gags has Mighty Midgets. A lot of those matchups could potentially be fighting for playoff spots here. So at least 1, 2, three, maybe four of those matchups. So, well, here in Week 12, pretty much every matchup is going to have some form of playoff implication here. So, this is going to be a fun one to watch. We got a bunch of, obviously it's Thanksgiving. Got a bunch of games going on Thursday, which I hate, but that's what it is on Thanksgiving here. So this week is going to be stretched out. Said Thursday, Friday, Sunday, all the way down to Monday. Let's see. I think the Monday game is Seahawks and Eagles. So there will definitely be people having players in that game coming down. So it's going to stretch all the way from noon on Thursday to midnight on Monday night here before we figure out some of these matchups here. But yeah, this is going to be an exciting week to see. In case you can't tell, because I'm going on and on about it. I'm excited to see what happens here this week because a lot of the matchup projections are real close. Implications on the line for pretty much somebody in every single matchup here. So, all right. That said, good luck to everyone in the upcoming week here. May all of your players meet or exceed expectations. No injuries. Everyone stays healthy. No COVID. None of this crap. Everything goes good. Please and let us come back here next week. And thank you for listening, watching, whatever it is you do. And hopefully, I'm excited for this week and seeing what happens. Hopefully, my team, I need you to come up. I need you to step up this week. Yeah, I'm worried about Alvin Kamara. Worried about lots of things here going forward. But yeah, some teams are surging right now. Some teams are kind of trailing off. And this is the time of year where you want to be one of those teams that is surging. So sorry, Kevin. I know you get mad when I say goodbye, then I keep on talking. So, all right, everyone. Thank you again for watching, listening, whatever it is you do. All your players meet or exceed expectations, and we will see you back here again next week to recap what happened in Week 12. And finally, of course, happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and hope you have a wonderful holiday. We have some COVID issues in the league. There's people, so if you are choosing to gather together with family and friends, whatever it is you plan on doing, stay safe, keep your distance here. Half of my family is not doing anything. They're keeping things separate. The other half of my family, the Trump half of my family said, dinner's at 5, come on over. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to go because COVID is running rampant right now. Things are bad. I don't want to be the one. I'm just gonna be blunt here at the end. I don't want to be the one that kills grandma. I don't want it to be me. I don't want that. Really make anybody sick, especially at a point where, and not to get into this too much, but obviously one of the biggest fears that we managed to navigate pretty well back in the spring, early summer, was that all the closing ups and the quarantine and the isolation and things like that was to keep. We knew that the death count was not going to be crazy, that a lot of people aren't dying from COVID. However, keeping the hospitals from being overwhelmed, other people are sick with other things, accidents happening, all this stuff. The hospital workers themselves. It's what happened in Italy. We saw it happen. We learned lessons. We did a great job earlier this year. But we got complacent, I guess. I don't know what's been going on. People were demanding that we keep things open. We try to keep things as normal as possible. And I don't know if it just doesn't get talked about enough, but it doesn't get enough news. But it's happening. Hospital workers, hospital and stuff, they are getting overwhelmed. And that is causing... And all the dominoes that fall, the snowball going down the hill, that stuff causes it's terrible. And we're getting exactly what we deserve. Those people don't deserve what they're getting, the people in the hospitals, the people working in the hospitals who are getting overwhelmed. And it makes me really mad that that's happening, and every people who are getting mad that they don't think that they just because you always spend your holidays with your families and you do stuff. You know what? This year is different. It's 1 year. It's different. It's just the way it is. You think about somebody other than yourself and the people who are actually going through extremely stressful, traumatic times right now. And said, don't get yourself sick. Don't get other people sick, and continue to clog up the healthcare system. And that's the worst thing that's going on right now. And it's going to be something that these hospital workers are going to be dealing with. The stress, the trauma from going through all of this is there's going to be long-term effects from all of this. And it's the best thing that you can do, each single one of us can do, is to just stay safe. Stay home if you can. You can FaceTime each other. We've got the technology. Families can get together over the internet, do what they need to do. It's just, why take those chances and put other people's health and safety into jeopardy here? So we'll see what happens. So, all right, that was enough, more than enough. You guys probably like rolling your eyes and saying, "Is this doing this and that?" But anyway, happy Thanksgiving, guys. So we'll see you back here next week, and we'll see what happens. Did I mention that I'm excited for week 12? I think I did. So, all right, guys. Thanks again, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye-bye.